everything in town here because they're just local.
Out for,
Talk with them and say,
But I'm
I was shocked.
First, they didn't have
When
enough
it
people to
happened,
run
I
them,
was
and
like,
second, they had
This
some
conference will now be
machines
recorded.
that were
Okay. Hey.
under construction.
I had Rob say that, well, because of COVID, they didn't have.
Yeah, then we'll, and then us too. that
That's
gets us-
actually embarrassing, if you ask me.
No reason
I
we
know
should
there's
have
a
to.
couple
They
others
should
who've
have
thrown it
everything.
in.
It's the way the political process.
we'll never approve it.
And my guess is.
But just like
Annandale
fireworks,
will-
Ron, you can cross the border. Are we ready, Michelle? Jim, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
And we can hear you. Awesome. All right, everybody, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please take the roll.
Mayor Zakowski.
Here.
Alderman Kittle.
Here.
Alderman Vries.
Here.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Here.
Alderman Montello.
Here.
Alderman Volkert.
Here.
Alderman Kraft.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, adoption of agenda.
I make a motion, we adopt the agenda.
Second.
It's been made and seconded. All in favor. Excuse me, 1 second. No, did we have to, are we good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Public comments. Do we have any public comments tonight? Does anybody wish to make a public comment? Okay. Tom, did you want to say something just for posterity's sake? Okay. Thank you. That is the public comment. Nope. Consent agenda.
I have a question on the consent agenda, just on the job description update. That's part of the consent agenda, right?
It is.
Okay. So what's the process for that? Just say I make a motion to approve it and just have a discussion about that
What's,
one?
well, yeah, I guess if you have some questions about it, why don't you go ahead and ask them now?
Oh, okay. So it was really just about the job description update for the wastewater superintendent. So this is a little bit my fault. I probably should have called and asked this question, but my understanding with kind of the structure for water and wastewater was that we weren't looking to have two superintendents. We were hoping that there was going to be one superintendent over them. So I guess that's really how this fits in with that plan. I guess I don't know. I don't know if it creates a different structure or if it really truly is just a job title change that isn't going to have any implications on structure. But I know when we switched to the lead model that there really wasn't a plan to have a superintendent because the public works director was providing that oversight.
So it really doesn't change the operations of the department. What was the lead operator was previously called the superintendent.
Right.
Currently the lead operator reports directly to the public works director.
Yep.
Just as the water superintendent reports directly to the public works director. So all it is a title change. We see that the superintendent title is more common for that line of work. And so even when this individual goes to other meetings with other of their peers, you would think that individual has less responsibilities in what they do.
Okay.
When there's just two individuals out at the plant, that person really is overseeing the ongoing, what you'd more likely see under a superintendent. But it doesn't change the roles and responsibilities, really just the title.
Okay, so there is not a plan to combine the wastewater and water superintendent position into one?
No, not at this time.
Okay. That's what I thought, and I don't remember if that was a conversation that we had had.
And previously, part of it too, I think, if you recall earlier this year, we also changed the positions for Public Works 1, Public Works 2.
Yes, yep.
We're now at street maintenance, park maintenance. So I think previously there was some discussion about kind of combining everything under the Public Works Director. but really realizing that there is specialization within some of those departments. So, so yeah, at this time, there's no intent to combine the water superintendent and the wastewater superintendent.
Okay, so this doesn't have a budgetary impact?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would not change the classification for that
Okay.
Employee either.
Okay.
So.
Anybody else got any other questions about the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion?
I just have a comment. I'm really excited to see the airport updates included in the manager's report.
Yep, that's good stuff. We'll just, everybody in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. All right, new business, 7.1, St. Andrews Place Low Pressure Sewer System and Sather Nature Center Restroom.
Mayor and council.
You're looking at me funny when you say that. I'd actually like to read the bubble above your head, Eric, when you're like, what should I call
I
him?
was looking at the screen.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, I got it.
Yeah, yep. So this project we've bid a couple times, working hard to entice some contractors to bid on it. Basically, half the project is doing some improvements on an existing low-pressure sewer system up in St. Andrews. They've had some issues up there with frozen force main and some clogging and pumps failing prematurely. So we'd like to do some improvements to that system. We'd like to insulate the force main. We've located it. It's only about 4 feet deep in areas. So we'd like to dig it up, get it insulated, prevent the freezing. And then we do some improvements to the system, add some flushing connections so we can do better maintenance on the system in the future. So that's half the project. The other half is restroom at the Nature Center. And so this is in conjunction with the trail grant that we got. So the trail that now connects the Nature Center to the Door Prairie was a grant, and we had funds left over. And so a thought was to get a restroom at the Nature Center, which currently we just use a porta potty. And so the restroom portion of the project would be paid for through grant funding, 50% of it.
So Eric, that it seems to me we talked before, this is a prefab,
Yep.
if you will. Restroom, is it concrete? What's it made out of?
Yeah, it's concrete.
And so they-
Upcut, they're called, I think they make them out of Chippewa, I believe. Yeah, so basically it's a contractor will have to come in, stub the utilities out, pour a concrete pad. We'll have a concrete sidewalk that goes up to the location, and then this restroom will essentially be built, and then they'll truck it to the site, and then a crane will have to install it.
And do you know, is the plan to have the same type of lock system I understand we have on all the other public restrooms? Well, I think they're on all the public restrooms where they kind of an automatic system and,
Yep, that was the plan.
okay. I do want to talk about St. Andrews Place utilities. That sewer system is, what are we talking about, 25 years old?
No, a lot less than that.
Uh,
Maybe
it's-
15.
I think it was 2001 it's put in.
It's 20 years
Oh,
old
yeah,
anyhow.
yeah.
And really for the benefit of anybody who's listening tonight, the question that came to my mind is, we, the city, didn't put that sewer system in. Somebody else did, a contractor did, working under developer that was looked at by somebody who was an engineer, and ultimately the city accepted it. I asked the question earlier today, and again, I say this for the benefit of the rest of you, in terms of being able to go hold somebody accountable, because in layman's terms, that was poorly designed, right, Eric? It's not deep enough. And I guess, shame on me, I didn't really think about sewer and pressure. But I guess if you put a lift in, that kind of creates pressure, but you definitely have, it's not deep enough and there's not enough pressure for it to operate correctly.
Yeah, it's not that it gets too much pressure, it's that.
No, it doesn't get enough
It
pressure.
doesn't get enough, it doesn't have enough velocity in the line to clean it properly,
Yeah.
and so you get buildup in there, so.
So stuff doesn't necessarily flow downhill, is that what you're saying? But I guess relative to the city has taken this project on for the betterment of the folks who live in that part of town because they've got this poor sewer system. And Noah, can you just comment on that? Because we talked about that today.
Yeah, so I think this is a project that really highlights the importance of having proper inspections done. And when we bring forward improvements to accept them, the city is then taking on the responsibility in perpetuity for those improvements. And so whether it be any residential development, commercial development, if they're constructing a sidewalk, water, sewer, streets, that's why we have either staff or a contracted individual out there doing those inspections at the cost of the developer. And that's also why we have a financial guarantee for that 1-year warranty period as well, because we also don't want to accept improvements and then 6 months later there's cracks in the road or in the sidewalk. And now the taxpayers are on the hook for paying that cost. So in this case, it was accepted several years ago. Now here are there's improvements that need to be made. That's at the sole cost of the city. And oftentimes the original developer or the original engineer, they may not even be in business anymore. They may not be around. And so when we bring forward acceptance of public improvements and that 1-year warranty period, sometimes those things are just on the consent agenda and it may seem like, well, yeah, we see those every few months. It's not a big deal, but it is a really important process because in some cases it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of infrastructure that we're accepting.
So
And,
just to be fair, you said a few years ago, you mean 20 years ago.
Right.
I just would like to make that differentiation because anybody listening said, well, a couple years ago, well, you should be able to find the engineer and so on. And I think that, Eric, I want to ask you a question, just kind of what you understand the way this looks today, right? What we got out there in the ground.
Yep.
If somebody did that today, and I know this isn't necessarily your specialty, right? Is that fair to say?
I've designed similar systems.
Okay, well then it is your specialty. So now I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Could you look at that today? If somebody was doing that today, could you look at that and say, this isn't going to work long term? It's not a good design. Can I use that term?
It's not going to work. It's not how I would have designed it.
Okay.
But and as far as depths, like the depths on the plans that were designed aren't the depths that are out there. So that was more of an inspection issue. Like they weren't installing, some of the stuff didn't get installed per the plans that were
Sure.
developed.
So I think back to your point, Noah, sometimes people don't understand why the process, and I guess this is kind of like Beth, with what you deal with, people sometimes don't understand why there's all the steps, why all the inspection. And I think it's safe to say this is a great example of why you got to cross T's and dot I's every step of the way. And the minute you assume something's going to be right, which you could almost argue somebody did, I guess we'll give somebody the benefit of the doubt and say that they assumed it was right and didn't check or whatever, you end up with this. So
we've had other, I think to Eric's point on, on paper, it was going to be at the proper depth. What was constructed in the field
Right.
wasn't. We've had developers and projects come forward where on paper it looks really good and they promise and say one thing. And then when it comes to cutting costs out in the field, they're looking for the city to turn the other eye and just accept it. So.
all right, well, you've got 2 bids. Eric, I don't know if you were meaning to get to that about the bids that you got for the combined both projects, so I'll give it back to you.
So we've worked with Pembroke companies in the past. I wouldn't have any reservations with working with them again. So we would recommend going with the low bid of Pembroke at $339, $712.50.
So move.
Okay, there's a motion,
I'll second it.
and now there's a second to the motion to accept the bid from Pembroke Companies for $339, $712.50. Any further discussion?
Let's go to the
I got
Sather.
one question.
ahead,
Ultimately,
Jim.
with the initial thing that happened about 20 years ago, who was responsible for the inspection? Was it the city, or are we just assuming?
So the city is ultimately responsible for accepting the public improvements, whether that be a city employee that's doing the inspection or if it's a contracted inspector. I don't know offhand who the individual was that did the inspection at that time, or if the city may not have even been doing inspections even at that time.
Back
Okay.
then, it wasn't. It was pretty typical for a lot of communities to just let them build it,
the
and
ins-
have on-site
the-
inspection.
The contractor said it's in, it's good, and they said, oh, okay, bury it, let's go.
Yep, you do some of the testing to make sure stuff's gonna hold together and it's good.
Jim, does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. Could everybody speak directly into their microphones? I can hear Mike really good, but I can't hear the other people very well.
Nobody else has talked.
Thank you.
I have a question about the Sather. Was the grant supposed to pay for the entire bathroom?
Just a portion. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it's a matching grant.
So what did the trust fund commit?
So I think the remaining, just pulling up the amount, I think the grant amount was 55,000. So roughly half
52.
the project cost. The original grant.
Half
for
of the 111?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And
So
we have
the-
that taken out of our trust fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the original grant was a little less than $250,000.
Yep.
So it is a matching amount, and so had we not proceeded with the restroom project, the remaining grant funds would just be would go back essentially, would be
Just as-
reallocated to another city.
And just for an update on that, where are we at with that as far as phase 2? Are we going to get another grant for that
With the trail,
with the trail?
the trail's paved. That's the nature center to door.
I thought there was a phase 2 to this.
No, the trail was paved last year.
The County A trail.
Are you thinking of out to Fox Run? And
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of from Richmond Way to
Yep.
the highway.
Oh,
Yeah,
along A.
that's a
That-
different
that's
grant.
separate. Yep, that's a different project.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, different
Sorry, I
grant.
thought it was the same. Okay.
Yep, this would be the door prairie restoration to the Sather Nature
Right.
Center, looping underneath the bridge there. Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries. Any further questions? All right, please call the roll.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Breeze.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes?
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
All right, 7.2, that motion passes. Electric Department purchase request.
So we didn't have a utility commission meeting last week due to lack of a quorum, but we do have three items here, three purchase requests from the electric department. One purchase request is for three-phase transformers, one is for single-phase, and then there's primary wire purchase. So these are really just restocking their inventory. Obviously, significant lead times on some of these, and so we felt it was important to bring them forward to the utility commission rather than waiting until the August utility commission and postponing it a month. If you have any specific questions about any of the purchases or the quotes, Wes Arndt is also available with us remotely, but we would have been bringing these forward tonight anyways, because per our purchasing policy, they're over the designated dollar amounts. So, but really just keeping up with some of the new construction and projects going on. Some of these you're looking at a 16 to 20 week lead time. So really felt it was important to get these in the queue and proceed.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Noah
Are you
or
looking-
Wes?
Are you looking for a separate motion for each of these?
You could approve them all in one motion if you'd like.
And actually, I just want to ask the question, did we already cover what I would call the quasi-emergency nature of the equipment that we're buying? Or does this not fall under that? Is that something we did last month?
That was at our last meeting. Yep.
Okay.
With the substation.
Yeah, this is more maintenance related.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Motion to approve.
You want to clarify that you're covering all the items that are on there?
Sure. I make a motion to approve the three requests and the quotes that we've received.
No, I don't. You don't have to for me, but I just for the sake of, we can get them in the minutes. All right, we have a motion to approve all three of those items, a three-phase transformer, single-phase, and a primary wire purchase. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded with a tie. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Breeze. Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes?
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Item 7.3, compensation policy.
Yeah, so I'll give a brief introduction to this, and we also have a slide we'll bring up here on the screen in a little bit. This draft policy included was really a follow-up from conversations staff had either individually or in groups of two with the mayor and council earlier this spring. Obviously, we know that it's a challenging job market right now, trying to recruit, retain high-quality employees and making sure that we're being competitive. And if you recall, back in 2019, we had a compensation and benefit study that was prepared by Carlson Detman. There were some components of that project that of that study that we did not proceed with at that time, and that's determining market placement, designing a wage range structure, and developing implementation plan. And so the draft policy included in the packet is really our first crack at listening to all the feedback we heard from all of you and kind of putting pen to paper of what would a draft policy look like. And so I will give just kind of a high-level overview. I know we sent this out, I think, just shortly before the 4th of July. So some of you have maybe had time to review it. Some of you may have just briefly skimmed through it. So if the council tonight would like to just kind of have this as a first reading, we would like as much feedback as you have. That way, if there's things that you think should be clarified or changed, that way we know before our August meeting what we're kind of being tasked with doing. But I will go through just a few highlights of the policy that's before you.
No, if I can just interrupt you for 1 second. So again, I just make it clear to everybody, it's not the intention that we would approve this tonight. So really, I to use the words that the mayor used with me on the phone today, let's consider it a first reading. That's probably not, it's an appropriate thought, although it doesn't really apply here, but really just the idea to get it out there. And I would say it's fair that staff needs feedback from people. So I know there's been some discussion about some things that possibly should be different or clarified or whatever, but now the clock is ticking. This will be back on the agenda at the August meeting to get an approval as to, so you got a voice right now in what that looks like. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So a few things that I think are important to highlight. One is looking at salary grade and range adjustments. In the past, when it comes to the annual budget, in some cases we have a cost of living adjustment that's 2%, 3%, 1.5%. It really hasn't necessarily been based on, it's just kind of been an arbitrary number, just to some extent, based on how the economy is, based on what other municipalities or other employers are doing. And on the second page of the proposal, we look at adjusting salary ranges based upon the Bureau of Labor Statistics Employment Cost Index of wages and salaries for state and local government workers. And so this is not based on inflation that you hear about in the news. Say the price of gas is going up. It doesn't mean that employees are all going to get a 10% salary increase because gas went up or food went up. This is based specifically on local and state government employers. And we did want to show just what, in recent years, what that number has been versus what our cost of living adjustment has been, and the fact that we already know what the 2023 number is. So for planning purposes, we would already have that number. So
What is that number?
so we'll bring up here. So what you see in blue is what that number is. What is in orange has been the increase that we have approved as a mayor and council. So the number for 2023 is at 3.1%. 3% is the cost of living adjustment that's also approved for the police union agreement for 2023. So last year, this will test my eyes too. But
Just
You
turn
gotta
around.
turn
Just
around.
turn around. It's easier for you to read.
that won't test my eyes. So for example, in 2022, the ECI index was 1.6. The cost of living increase that was approved by the council was 2%. You can see in some cases it's a little higher, in some cases it's a little lower.
No, is it fair to say that part of what my conversation has been with you, and really we're trying to provide some structure because the way things have kind of historically been done, going back since the beginning of government, it appears to be here. It's been kind of seat of the pants, if I can use that expression. This is what we feel like. And what you're really hoping to do through this policy, and I'm not saying this to you as well, Sarah, is to really put some definition into why we're coming forth with these numbers. I think that, the idea that we're going to build a policy that says, well, this is what we have to do then, I don't think that's the intent of the policy. It's to provide some definition. So I just, if anybody's concerned, like, well, now you're going to use this, so that's on an autumn. So let me ask you this question. Relative to that, if this policy was in place and 3.1 is that number, does that mean that 3.1 is the cost of living adjustment that we use for 2023?
It would still be at the discretion of the council.
Okay.
So
I just, to that point, that's all.
yeah,
The
so
way-
it doesn't necessarily commit the council, again, especially when we get into difficult budget decisions, it's not that we're committing ourselves to that, but it is trying to tie it to something that's actually, it's data driven, it's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's used for whether it be Federal Reserve, whether it be looking at rates for Medicare. It also is used for salary increases for the military. I mean, as other employers look at these numbers, and it's not just, how about 1%? How about 3%?
Yep.
But it doesn't necessarily commit future councils to saying, well, if it's 3.1, we have to be 3.1.
But it does set the standard in the policy that gives the administration team the flexibility to actually make that change without necessarily having to come to council to say, okay, let's talk about this again. Let's go through the process. It's all laid out for us so that we know, sorry, Jim, that in general, the cost of living adjustment, if we decide that we're going to include a cost of living adjustment as part of the salary schedule here at the city, would follow the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers for public and government employees. So yeah, I think it's a great framework for, and transparent. I mean, people know where it's coming from. People know the information, employees know, taxpayers know, administration knows, city council knows. So I think it's a great move towards transparency and equity within the city. So I think it's great.
Not necessarily follow, but give us an outline of what's fair. What's normal, what's fair, what we should be doing.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
So the couple other highlights, and I'm not going to go through the document section by section, but looking at, so that really addresses if there was, and again, that would be essentially across the board, that cost of living adjustment. Later on in the document, we then get into pay for performance. And so identifies based on performance reviews, whether an employee is below expectations, meeting expectations, or exceeding expectations with a possible increase. As it's outlined in the policy, the council would have to authorize whether there were going to be any funds even allocated for an increase. And this really is tying it then into, and this is where, from an implementation standpoint, there would have to be training with staff and department heads to make sure that we're doing good quality, fair, objective performance reviews. And it's not just, it's not a 10-minute box checking exercise, but that we're linking our strategic plan with the goals that are being set forward by the council. We're looking at measurable outcomes for each department and for each position. And it's not just, I like this person, I think they should get a raise, or this person's been here a long time, they haven't had a raise for a while, I'm gonna give them a raise. But it's tied specifically to their performance review. And again, whether the council wanted to allocate any dollars at all for increases would be, again, a decision by the council. So again, that would be a a change from the past. Oftentimes, we've only brought forward positions that we feel may be outside the range, or if we feel there's been an employee that's been exceeding expectations, but really gives a more, again, trying to put something in writing of what is that process. And actually, I did skip ahead a little bit. Just the section before that gets into really addressing how employees move through. You know, if you're an entry-level employee that may be brought on at a wage below the midpoint for their position, how long does it take me? What is the process for me to get an increase? Currently, employees just receive the cost of living adjustment unless we bring forward a position that we feel is no longer competitive and should be increased, and if that employee is performing well. This identifies that an employee would be at the midpoint before their 4th year of service with the city. Now, some employees are brought on at the midpoint or above the midpoint based on their previous experience, the qualifications for the position. It doesn't necessarily mean that after 4 years, that employee has to be at the midpoint. It might be 2 years, it might be 1 year, depending where they're brought in, depending how they're performing. But it also allows us to move an employee through without necessarily have to go to a closed session. Hey, how do I, in some cases, we've had employees who could actually quit, apply again, and they'd probably be brought on at a higher wage than what they were currently earning because there really wasn't a process for them to move through. And as you recall, when we discussed this spring, some employers have more of a step model where just every year you move a column or a row. And again, this is our attempt to kind of take the feedback that we've heard from all of you to try to tailor something specifically for New Richmond. And again, should that be 3 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 5 years? We heard a little bit of a range based on the feedback from all of you. But something, again, after tonight, we'd certainly welcome additional feedback on. But the challenge with a policy like this is, you want it to be clear and specific. At the same time, you're not looking to set yourself to say every employee has to be at the midpoint by this date or else. There is a little bit of a case-by-case basis, but at the same time, it's trying to set the parameters so that an employee knows generally how long it's going to take, or if an employee wants to receive a bonus at the end of the year, what do I have to do, or what is the process for doing that? So those are, I think, some of the highlights. And obviously, we discussed the employment cost index. So I guess curious if anyone has any feedback, discussion for this evening. Otherwise, again, we would intend to bring it to our regular August meeting. We don't have a scheduled work session here in July, but if there's edits or things that we should clarify or reword, we really need the feedback from all of you. Otherwise, next month we may have the exact same document coming back. So anything you'd like to share with us this evening would be helpful. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us here in the coming weeks.
I think you've done a really good job of trying to incorporate some very diverse feedback from 7 different people. So congratulations, it makes sense. I think that there's probably some opportunities for us to do things just a little bit differently in terms of the individual pay and the pay for performance. I think for me, there's a lack of clarity when we're talking about how they're advancing through the range up to midpoint and kind of, through their 4th anniversary. I'd rather see something like a step so that there is a very clear progression and it's equitable and there's really no question. And maybe that's what's here, but I'm not really understanding it like that. And that would, for me, it would be for individuals who are hourly employees or kind of that non-exempt level employee. I do see our exempt level employees kind of operating more in the pay performance category simply because they're typically more senior. The positions are in demand. They have a different skill set. And And so really doing you get an increase, your increase, any increase you get really is in fact tied to your performance outside of the cost of living. So just maybe fleshing that out a little bit more. I'm also very interested in how we're going to budget for this on a year-to-year basis, like what it means. I mean, in looking at it, it looks great, and again, offers, I think, a lot of transparency for us, for the taxpayers, for the employees, but kind of figuring out how to fit that into a budget without saying, you know, we have $10,000 this year, like figure it out within this framework. I think that would be somewhat impossible to do. So I think we have to be willing, if we're going to adopt a compensation philosophy, to allow some discretion with the administration team in kind of implementing this and how it's going to work, and then do some check-ins to see, you know, is it meeting the goals and objectives that we originally set.
Carrie, is it fair to say that, you know, because you're in this position now with your current employment, been here, and I actually direct this to staff as well. You know, you know if you have employees who, you know, everything lines up in terms of what they qualify for, and then you've made, hopefully, right, an objective decision about the thing that's difficult for me to wrap my brain around, and you're kind of touching on it right now. If the city council is asked, okay, well, how much money do you want to make available for performance increases, when in fact that may be driven by staff saying we need X number of dollars put into the budget for performance increases. I think when we construct the budget, it's not a matter of knowing, well, who are you giving that to? We'll get to that, right? But I really think that staff has to drive that conversation, because the truth is, if you're waiting for the council to say, hey, we got X number of dollars available for performance bonuses, the number will always be.
Wage adjustments, Mike.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there you go. Zero, right? Just because we don't really think that way, and yet you may have some, what I would call burning fires of people who are below the grade and they've got this outstanding performance and whatever. So that's the only thought I would say about that is I really think that has to be driven by staff. The request has to come from you.
It might even be helpful to like look at, because I like projections, just to see what things might look like in trying to make a decision. I mean, this is a big decision. We hope that this is the framework that, you know, the city can follow for the next couple decades. I mean, really, with some adjustments for, you know, the employment cost index and things like that. But, you know, setting up something that is going to work in the long term, but really looking at what would this look like with our current employee population? If we know that the adjustment for 2023 is 3.1%. If we were to go with 3%, what does that look like just from a cost of living adjustment standpoint? And then what would it look like for our performance? I mean, if every single employee at the city met expectations, what would that look like for our exempt level staff? And what would that look like for our hourly staff? And what is that number? Because I think that would be helpful to kind of figure it out. I don't know if that's helpful for everybody else. I don't know if that's possible. Is that like asking way too much, or?
Well, and I can comment on a couple things that you addressed, Carrie. So I do think that you have a fair summary in terms, you know, we're kind of at like, you're kind of going through a step model more for those entry level or hourly employees. Okay. And then when you are at the midpoint or your more senior level staff, then it really is kind of more that pay for performance. So we're kind of combining, again, some of the feedback we heard, some that like a step model, some that don't. You know, if the council, you know, in the coming weeks as you review this, or if there's final wordsmithing, clarifications that need to be made, this really gives us the direction then to then look at implementation. Because to your point, you know, okay, if that's how long, you know, if it's 4 years to get to midpoint, we may then, when we look at implementation, come to you later this fall with the budget to say, okay, and obviously it's not, okay, we have X number of employees who are below the midpoint and they've been here more than 4 years. We think next year's budget, they should all get to the midpoint. Right. Well, that costs X number of dollars, we may not. So that may be a couple of years at least for implementation. And who do you prioritize first? Is that exempt? Is it non-exempt? Is it, again, do you look at someone that has been here several years, hasn't been at the midpoint? Do you look at the the competitiveness for trying to recruit for that particular area. But really the intent for this policy is really to make sure that, okay, is this a good summary and compromise, if you will, based on what we've heard from all of you? Kind of start first with the policy and then to get into the implementation and what does this actually, what did this cost? So that we can already look at, for purposes of our budget discussions here this fall.
Right.
And what is that, if there is a budgeted amount for salary adjustments, what is that number? And that's something that we can certainly provide, but we want to make sure
Like
that
a rough estimate, like not actually going through and having to do it, but you know what I mean? Just to kind of give, is this like a $100,000 kind of proposal, or are we talking, $20,000? I mean, there's like, it's a pretty big difference, because then, I mean, if you're talking $250,000 a year, then I might be more likely to say, okay, I like the employment cost index for adjusting ranges, but it does not equate to an actual increase for an employee to adjust their range so that they have a higher percentage chance of getting a larger increase on their pay for performance. Do you know what I mean? So, because it's definitely different than what we've done before. It's 2 potential opportunities for increase, when typically most staff had 1 opportunity through the cost of living adjustment, and then a handful of positions out of our total workforce came for consideration, right? So,
and we would hope that, again, we identify, again, below expectations, meet expectations.
yes.
Really all staff should be meeting or
Yes.
exceeding expectations. Otherwise, changes may be necessary of some sort, or performance improvement plan. So it's not to, the assumption isn't just I meet expectations, therefore I'm entitled to an increase. In that, what we're proposing, they would have that cost of living adjustment, and that exceeding expectations should really truly be exceeding expectations. And it's not for staff to look at that to say, well, I met expectations, therefore I should get a 2% increase on top of.
It's adding additional value
Right.
to the position. And it might make sense to put the percentages for the below meets and exceeds. I mean, obviously, we don't even need to talk about below expectations, but the meets expectations and exceeds, to do it as like a ratio of where they sit in the range. So like if you sit at below midpoint and you exceed expectations, you may get 3%, where someone who sits above midpoint and exceeds expectations, they might get a 2%, because you're trying to kind of bring everyone, create some equity.
Or actually nothing.
Or nothing,
If they're already above the midpoint. But to Carrie's question, I thought that when we talked about this compensation, what was it called? Review that we did, the study. I actually thought that we kind of had a kind of number of employees that were below mid. We did, and so I think it's a super interesting question. It would to for us to understand, just to get, if everybody that's 4 years or more was at the mid-range, it's going to take X number of dollars just to get there. I think it's super valuable to us to kind of understand where we're at, right? And how we address that, that's a separate question, but it's obviously an important question. But I do think that that's important for us to know, because if you ask any of us, well, I don't know, I think everything's, it's all good. And it may not be, there may be 20% of the workforce it's not good for. So that would be helpful. And I just want to add this, that I think it's super important for staff to hear from all of you, us, relative to this. And I guess I'm just going to ask you that you check in with Sarah. And if you don't have any input, please tell her that. Or if you have things you want to talk to her about, please tell her that. I think there's a fair amount of work has gone into this, and they are absolutely desirous to hear input from the council. And my hope would be that when we come back in August, we have a policy that has been vetted enough that we could have a consequential discussion about it, right? And so really, this is kind of, so we don't have a whiteboard, which is one of my favorite things, not to have a whiteboard. We got a place to start, but I'm just asking all of you to reach out to Sarah and let her know if you've got input or not. And if you have it, let her know what it is so these things we can do some work on. We got basically 4 weeks, which may seem like a lot of time, but that's what I'm asking all of you. So, and I don't want to cut anybody off. If anybody's got any other questions for staff or comments right now?
I just got.
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of comments. One on job classification. It says every 9 years comprehensive benefit and salary analysis. Are we doing analysis? Every 9 years seems like a long time. Things change so fast in 1 year. Are we looking at some kind of analysis sooner than that?
So in the policy, it's every 3 years would be like a smaller.
I can't hear you.
Every 3 years within the policy, every 3 years would be a study that would be done in an analysis, and then every roughly 9 years would be a really large, comprehensive study and analysis. So it is broken down a couple of different ways, as well as just in general. They'll be evaluated internally as well whenever there's an opening or external conditions dictate that we should.
Relative to the mayor's question, Sarah, when you say every 3 years, is that something that would perhaps be done in-house? And then 9 years, we're hiring a firm? Is that kind of what you envision, or?
So I think it maybe would be a combination. So I know when we did the really large Carlson-Detman study, it was a very large undertaking, but they do, I can't remember exactly what they called it, but they do like a smaller version of that, which is like a refresh of what they did. So because they'd already have a lot of the data, they can just kind of update it with new market numbers that they have, statistics, any other comparables that they have from any other studies they've recently done. So that was kind of more from the feedback that we got from you, some of you, was to do more of that smaller version, still external, but every 3 years, and then at a longer period doing that really comprehensive study.
Does that answer your question, Mayor?
Pretty much. I'm just thinking that no matter what, 9 years is a long time, because like I say, things change in 1 to 2 years. Lately, it's been changing rapidly, and 9 years seems like a long time. I know it costs money, but
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it would be
It's
kind
a
of,
significant
that's
cost.
what I mean. But still, 9 years is a long time. It seems to me. Anyways, we can address that later. And I had one other question. In the pay system, it said the mayor and city council will be notified after pay raises are determined. So the way that sounds is that we're going to be told, the city council, the mayor and city council will be told what's going to happen. And to me, I thought that the mayor and city council, or the city council, has the final vote on that, not be told after the fact. At least that's the way the statement sounds to me.
So the feedback that we heard collectively was that the council as a whole didn't want to be involved in terms of seeing individual performance reviews and weighing in on this is a good employee, they should get an increase. So the way that it's structured is that the council would allocate if there's any dollars even being allocated in the budget for salary adjustments, but really it's putting the again, for the implementation standpoint, that we're having quality performance reviews. Those are being done by the department head, and that any increase is being very carefully considered, and that it's not just a department head or a city administrator that's saying, this is a good person, I'm going to give them a bonus every year. And at the same time, it's also not the council doing the same thing of, we want to, you're not privy to the day-to-day performance of those individuals. So to come to a closed session meeting and to say, here's 10 people that we think should get an increase, what do you all think? And you might say, well, I know this one, I don't know who that is. What did that person do last year? So it's really trying to say, you put the parameters on, if there's even any dollars available, you're gonna have, and then but the actual who gets what or who's worthy of giving an increase would be determined by the department head with consultation with the finance director, the city administrator. So that was, again, kind of based on the collective feedback that we heard from all of you. We felt was appropriate, but again, if that's something that you'd like to see changed in the final document, something certainly we could consider. So
I think-
I don't know if Nick, if you had.
Well, I was just going to say.
So what you're basically saying is that if we say there's going to be a 3% increase, you're going to figure out how it's going to be spread between the employees.
Well, it probably wouldn't be that way, Mayor, because we're not talking about cost of living, we're talking about performance. And I think what they've said tonight is that it'd be like the council saying, we've got $10,000 in the budget, which maybe doesn't even scratch the surface, but, for performance increases. So I just wanted to add this, that I think, there's kind of what I refer to as a middle ground between what the mayor's asking about and really kind of the way this is set up. And I could envision, again, I think if you're waiting for the council to say, hey, we got X number of dollars available for merit increases, can I call them that? I think you might be waiting a long time. Staff knows what the urgency of that is. We don't know, right? And so in my mind, what makes sense is that staff comes to the council and says, we are requesting X number of dollars, and I could see it even being allocated just to this extent. This is for exempt, this is for non-exempt. You know what it is. I agree with you. I think it's problematic to ask the 7 elected officials in New Richmond to really talk about this employee, right? I think that's problematic, actually. But I think to the mayor's question, I don't think it's unreasonable because, again, I think the ask has to initiate with staff. And it's just, we're asking for this. You've done all the work. We're asking for this much money, and we're going to just tell you this. It's broken down. Because I would say this, that if, let's say you said one year, it's 100% exempt, and 0% non-exempt, I think that as an elected official, I'd say, yeah, I kind of like to know a little bit more about that. To your point, exactly, right? And so, but I do think, to me, that's ample information to say, we're asking for this much money and it's broken down. This is for exempt employees. I didn't ask for a list. And this is for non-exempt employees. That's just the allocation of those funds. I just don't think the council, again, if you're waiting for the council to say, hey, we want to throw X number of dollars up there for you to use, the answer is always going to be the same, and they're never going to do that, right? Because there's too many, what people see as a pressing need. You know what the pressing need is. So that's all I want to say. Mayor, what do you think about that? That concept could work for you?
We have to discuss it. That's why we're not going to pass it tonight. And any further questions, and like Mike said, I think any alder person should be sending in any information to this, because I hope not after the fact saying, why do we do this? This is our chance now to give Noah input on this and Sarah. So I think, like Mike said, in the next 4 weeks, if there's any questions, got to remember there's no dumb question, just ask the question. And maybe other people are thinking the same thing, but ask that question and it's going to make this better for everybody.
And Nick, I'm sorry, were you going to say something or?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's really important that you empower your staff to run your compensation structure, right? I mean, they're responsible for hiring, they're responsible for termination, they're responsible for everything in between. And so you employ Noah and Rayanne to run your budget, and your structure should be that they request the dollars that they need in order to administer your personnel system and your compensation system. But the council doesn't want to be in the business of any of that other than allocating the dollars that are requested. And I think to Mike's point, how you do that is a matter of what's going to be most efficient and what's going to allow them to work through that process best. But, think about this in the context of we're really creating the structure to allow your staff to implement the best possible compensation structure that at the end of the day, you're looking for engagement. You're looking to keep your employees happy and satisfied and productive, and they are their happiest and most satisfied and most productive when they know exactly how they advance, right? So I think that's what this policy is really trying to get at. And then the question is, how do we do this so that Noah and Rayanne have direction as to how you want to see these requests move through and the level of input that you'd like the council to have before allocating those dollars or considering those requests.
I think it's a great objective way to do this. I think this is what's been missing for quite a while, and I'm really happy to see this because honestly, if this is the framework that we utilize to evaluate all of our staff, I have no issue with it at all. Besides, well, like a couple, just. But like the overall philosophy, like you should be managing the compensation program. I mean, we should not be doing that. There's too much opportunity for that subjectivity, and staff, yeah, I think they'll be really excited to see something that's very objective. The only other comment that I would make is just that one of the most important people that's missing from this document is really the department director. So there's a lot, HR, city administrator, mayor, and council, but they're the ones who are actually evaluating the employees. Yep. So I think that they have to be on board with any recommendation for if it's a promotion, if it's a downgrade, if it's just a wage adjustment, whatever it is, they have to be a critical part of this process.
Yep, agreed. So, Craig?
No, I was just curious if I know you've gotten feedback from us, and we appreciate that. Has any employee seen this document, or how?
Nope, we have not circulated this with department heads, so we've just started with the council. Again, today was just a draft, but really wanted to see if we're even in the right ballpark.
I just think it's before we approve it, it would be nice to know what the employees think about something like this, how they get raises, that kind of thing.
I think they'd be thrilled.
Yeah, and I think, I think to Carrie's...
I think it's important.
I think to Carrie's point, if you want to talk about the history, there's been nothing.
Correct.
It's like, well, why did that employee, people talk? Why did they get that? And so now we're finally codifying kind of a set of rules, and a person can actually look and say, again, objectively, this is why it's happening. So I think that's a fair question, and I think that the answer is they would be happy to know that there's actually a set of rules that exist, and it's not just the person sitting in an office, how they feel about them at a personal level.
And my point is, I'm glad they will know. I just think that they should maybe have some feedback as to how this document's written. That's just my opinion.
Pete, did you have something?
Well, I'm just kind of repeating everything. I just think it's important for those that are doing the performance reviews are the ones that are going to be making recommendations. We don't want to be, as a council, individually.
When you say that, you're talking about individual employees. And I completely agree with you. So does anybody have anything else? Again, your homework is?
Just thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And but to get a hold of Sarah, please, all of you, and even if you have no input, please call her so she can check a box and say, I would hope that by the time we get here next month, she can say, I've heard from all of you, even if it's, nope, I think we're good. Please let her know. All right. So with that, we are going to move on to 7.4 Meadow Crossing First Edition Final Plat Application.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor virtually. I have the next two items up, and actually they're fairly simple items. You've seen at least one of them before, so we're going to start with the Meadow Crossing First Edition Final Plat. So this you've seen previously. It was brought before the council and it was approved July 14th of 2021 in preliminary plat form. Okay, so when we look at a preliminary plat, we're looking at everything. Utilities, stormwater, number of homes, lot size, everything is kind of analyzed at that time. So when we come to final plat, it's fairly easy. They're going to put in a little bit of additional information, and we work at things like the development agreement and agreement for basically the establishment of a homeowners association and those types of things. So overall, Creative Homes Construction Investments has applied for their final plat for Meadow Crossing First Edition. Large, big picture, the full plat is 94 homes, and we talked about that. The final plat itself has 42 twin homes and 34 single-family homes with 4 outlots and some public right-of-way. The only recommendations we have on the approval from the city council are 2 things. Approval of a maintenance agreement for the outlots and an establishment of the homeowners association for sidewalks and the boulevard and abutting properties to the outlots. So it's a very simple process tonight, but if you have questions, we have Steph here with Creative Homes to answer any additional questions that you might have.
Does anybody have any questions for the developer? All right, do I hear a motion?
Sorry, can I just add, when you're talking about the agreement with the developer required for the maintenance of the outlots, the right-of-ways, et cetera, like, what does that look like?
So it looks like a homeowners association agreement as to who's actually going to be maintaining that.
Okay.
So if you own a piece of property on Main Street and you have a piece of sidewalk in front, you're responsible for maintaining it. There's portions of these outlots that are not owned by these folks. And so Meadow Crossing folks need to say, we're going to maintain those. So
Okay.
we're looking for an agreement that says we're
Like
going to
into
maintain.
perpetuity, like, because, I mean, what we saw happen, obviously back in like 2005, 2006, is that these developments that had covenants, that had some of these agreements, the person who enforced it no longer owned the land, they went out of business, and then these things were no longer enforceable. So how do we make sure that the long term, that is actually going to happen and we're not going to be responsible for the maintenance of it?
Right, and I think Noah pulled forward, he might have a comment, but this is
Okay.
how we would do that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is going to be for outlots. Another big one is stormwater ponds,
Yeah.
especially if it's a private pond. So that 10 years from now, something isn't functioning there, to say, okay, they're going to call us,
Mhm.
and we have to know, do we own that? Do we not own that? Even just who mows it, who's maintaining it, to your point, yeah, we've had cases where a homeowner association dissolves or the original developer says, yep, we're going to take care of it perfectly. And there wasn't something in writing. And now that developer goes under, and now who's mowing that site? So, so any outlet, any stormwater pond, having those maintenance agreements is really important.
And Carrie, we might own the outlots, they might be deeded over to the city, but the maintenance agreement for that would be with the developer.
Okay.
So in this particular example, are you saying specifically that a homeowners association is going to take care of the maintenance, or are you saying the developer is going to be taking care of that going forward?
Right, it's 2 different things. The ponds for stormwater is different than the sidewalks, and so there's a maintenance agreement with the developer for the stormwater ponds. And then there's a homeowners association for the rest of that.
Okay, so to that, so just in layman's terms, the people who live there are going to be responsible for the cost of mowing those outlots.
That is correct.
Okay, so you buy a house out there, you understand, you're on the dotted line, assessment, whatever. The stormwater pond, though, if that fails 10 years from now, and I understand that's not a normal occurrence, but whatever, we're going to call up Creative Homes and say, hey, that stormwater, remember that development you built? It's not working. Is that what I'm understanding?
Not exactly. So they would be maintaining the stormwater. We usually don't have issues with the filtration once it's
got it.
created. So
Yep.
that's a little different scenario.
But what you're describing is the stormwater, what is that then? What
It's
is
a
the
maintenance agreement, and we have it with a number of developers.
No, but what are they doing?
What's the maintenance they're performing? Are they just mowing?
Yeah, so they're mowing, or if there's plantings that they have around it, or any of those types of things. They
Okay.
need to make
Builds up
sure it
over time.
flows.
Okay.
Yep,
I think that's what he was asking.
okay. Correct.
Yeah, I just, the thing that was rolling through my brain, I understand the HOA part. What I don't understand is the perpetuity part of a developer, right? We had an earlier conversation tonight about a sewer system that was put in on a part of town, And I'm going to use your words, no, the developers, we have an issue, we go back, and the developer's not around, they don't exist anymore. I'm just curious about a situation like this, and I'm not picking on Creative Homes, I'm saying if any developer, if we have an issue, or somebody quits mowing the grass. So mowing the grass at the stormwater pond is specifically in this particular case, the developer's responsibility.
Yes, that's a portion of the maintenance.
Okay, so my question is, if it doesn't get done, and the developer's defunct, please, nothing intended for Creative Homes again, then whose responsibility? It's the city's.
Most likely because it's deeded over to us. But we've taken on, the council's made that decision in the past to take on the outlots with the stormwater.
Yeah,
And
so
Nick
that-
can talk to this. We did that kind of purposefully because we
Yes.
were struggling.
So this is a common issue or a common concern, particularly in communities that experience a high degree of development, right? So
Yep.
you have developers that come in of all kinds. You've got outlots in every development, and some of the developers are going to be here to stay, and some of them are not. In some communities, like Hudson, for example, they just make the decision that the outlots, the drainage improvements and whatnot get deeded over, and they're gonna take care of them as part of their maintenance. They decided that's how they're gonna deal with that issue. Here, we've looked to the developers in large part to enter into maintenance. And for those that we have issues with, then we have decisions to make about how it is that we're going. We haven't made the blanket decision just to take on the responsibility of those common areas because it's a lot of work and it's an addition to public works staff has to take on. We've decided that we deal with it. If there is an issue, then we'll deal with those issues.
So what I'm hearing you say is that in the city of Hudson, they've made a decision, okay, developer, we got this. We're going to take care of that maintenance of that stormwater pond. And we're talking about cutting the grass specifically around the stormwater pond, for example.
For example.
Yeah, just leave it easy. They're just taking that on right now.
Correct.
What we're doing is we're saying to the developer, hey, that's your responsibility, fully understanding that someday may come where the city is now taken on that responsibility because the developer doesn't exist anymore. Right? So, well, I'm just saying, if the developer doesn't do it, the city's going to do it. Yeah, well, okay. But anyhow, I just wanted to understand that, so, got it.
But you also run into the same issue when you rely on homeowners associations to take care of outlots as well. Some homeowners associations are good about meeting and taking care of their neighborhoods, and others are non-existent.
But I would say the difference is, potentially, that you could hold a homeowners association and their properties financially liable for the work that the city does. You could do that.
In theory.
In theory. Yeah, I love when lawyers use words like that. But I guess my point, my point is though, is that, and listen, I just wanted to make sure I understood it, that's all. I'll just stop with that. So, does anybody else have any other questions?
So I would say what city staff is recommending is approval of the final plat for Meadow Crossing First Edition with the two conditions that are in your packet.
Motion that we approve the final plat application subject to the conditions of the homeowners association for sidewalk maintenance and boulevard maintenance, and then an agreement with the developer to provide maintenance on the outlots.
Okay, as it's listed in your packet. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none,
I've
please
got-
call the roll.
I've
Oh,
got
go
one
ahead, Jim.
Question. Let's say that stormwater pond fails. We had one in the past that did, and we had to excavate it out. Who's responsible?
We are. It's deeded over to us. We've made that decision in the past as a city council.
I couldn't hear the word. I couldn't hear it all.
We are, Jim.
Yeah,
Okay,
the stormwater pond is the city's property.
okay. They're just doing the
Anything else?
maintenance around the pond.
Correct. Anything else? Please call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
No.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Okay, and then Memo Osborne, ETJ, Certified Survey Map.
So Ronald and Janet Osborne have applied for an ETJ CSM. They are located in the town of Richmond at 1562 Highway 65, so south of Walmart, quite a distance, kind of by B. Dalton Liquor Store there. We looked it over. This is you'll see it up on the screen there. They are creating an outlot to be sold off separately. So we really looked this over for the things we do at ETJ. As you know, we don't have a lot of control over these, but we did look at things, and we have one condition of approval, that there's a deed restriction on the parent parcel. So staff is recommending, and Planning Commission recommended it approval to the City Council at their July 7th meeting.
And I just, as a point of reminding everyone, apparently a couple years ago, state law, seems like the rules have changed.
They have changed. I believe it was 4 years ago, maybe 5 now, but I believe it was 4 years ago or so, where we are not able to talk about like population, how many items can go on. There's a number of things that we can't talk about, so or can't review, I should say. So it's up to just a few things. So. Streets, utilities, those kind of things we can look at and make recommendations for, in case it is annexed into the city in the future.
And just for a point of reference, the restriction, I guess, is subject to the following conditions. The parent parcel shall have a deed restriction recorded against the lot for right-of-way acquisition pending further development. So really, they don't have the freedom just to go and do some more stuff without getting an
Coming
okay
back to
from
us.
us. So,
Correct.
all right. Anybody have any questions for Beth, or is there a motion for that?
I'd make a motion to approve the CSM for the Osborne property.
All right, motion's made. Is there a second? Motion's made and second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Communications and miscellaneous. I know you've got a couple of things listed here. Noah, just before you get to that, I hope at some point sooner than later that there is some kind of a post-FunFest analysis done with the chamber. I have some communication from an individual who owns a piece of property that was pretty close to ground zero for the FunFest activities. And I certainly understand the huge undertaking that FunFest is, it's interesting that most members of the community really have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. And, thinking about, and I don't want to get to the specific comment, but just thinking about people can go and they can watch a parade and they can go do the carnival and so on. An awful lot of folks still don't know that we had a fatality in town. Actually, it was Sunday morning. It was after midnight Saturday night. And, there's other things going on. And there's a lot of moving pieces. And this feedback that I have from this individual who actually is in my district, they live there, but they also own a piece of commercial property, very frustrated with, to be kind, with a lack of communication and planning that went in for their particular property. And so to that end, I guess I'm going to pass along, and they asked me to pass this along, that there can be some constructive dialogue in the near future so that we can iron out some of these things. I really haven't heard of much besides the fatality that I mentioned, and I'm really not trying to tie that to FunFest at all. Just it happened concurrent with it. But that we can have this constructive dialogue, what worked, what didn't work. Obviously, this is a new setup this year, and I'd be curious to hear from the chamber what they feel didn't work. Let's just say it that way. But I certainly haven't talked to anybody that didn't have a good experience. So I'm going to give them kudos relative to that. So you had some items on here as well.
Yeah, so item 8.1 is just an update. As some of you know, over the last couple of years, there's been efforts to rename the post office here in Richmond. So this was a
A resolution was approved at the Senate in May, would now be going to the House. They expect to vote sometime in the fall. So just an update on that. Item 8.2 is looking at our August meeting date. We have our regular August meeting would be August 8th. However, August 9th is our primary. And so this room would be set up that evening with all of the things for the next morning. So really wanted, well, all the council and the mayor were here this evening to look at if we wanted to reschedule our August regular meeting date, and if so, if we wanted to keep it on a Monday, if we wanted to look at a day later on that week. Really just wanted to see what would work best for everyone. We could look at it, if we wanted to keep that date, we would have to look to another location. The one limitation with that is that here in this room, we have the microphones, we're able to record it. And so, you know, if we said, let's have the meeting at the fire station or a conference room, we're gonna lose some of those abilities for the public. So, but just wanted to see if folks wanted to keep it on a Monday, we could potentially move it back. Otherwise, if we wanted to already look at Wednesday or Thursday that same week, we could certainly do that as well. So if there's any feedback.
Well, my input I'll give you now. I would actually like to see us go to Monday, August 15th, so a week later, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So the 8th to the 15th, so that we in fact have this room with the things that come with that, microphones, the ability to televise, and public access, which is really key to me. And I also think it's nice, people know that council meetings are on Mondays. So that's just my input. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts.
I'm good for the 15th.
Okay.
I'm actually good for both dates, 15th and 29th, keeping them 2 weeks apart.
Well, yeah, so you're talking about a work session, obviously, on the 29th, but
Correct.
15th, Tom?
Yep.
Carrie? Ron?
I prefer, I'd have to look at my full calendar, but I prefer to keep it on Mondays, not switch it to like a Wednesday or Thursday. Those just don't work typically for me, so.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, did you want to chime in there at all?
Oh, and
You're on mute right now.
You're muted right now. Sorry.
Yeah, Jim, you're muted.
Yeah, the 15th is fine.
Okay, so we're gonna,
O'clock on the 29th?
it'll be the same, 7 o'clock. Oh, I'm sorry, but that's a separate question, Ron. So on the 15th, we're gonna have our normal start time, 7 PM. And then Ron is asking about on the 29th, yeah, work session, what do we, since 6
work
o'clock for
sessions.
penciling in for the work session?
The August work session would be pretty focused on the budget for 23 as well as the strategic plan. So the 29th would probably work better rather than having the back-to-back weeks just for staff for preparations
Right.
as well. So it'd be the 6 o'clock, yes.
Yeah, so we're plugged into August 15th. Anybody else got anything on either of those two items? One last thing I want to throw out there. I know that Public Works is taking up, I think on Wednesday,
Yep.
some discussion about some challenges out at the compost site.
Yes.
So I guess I look forward to, we're trying to find resolution. And again, I'm saying this for the benefit of folks in our community who use it. Again, may not be aware of the challenges that are out there. I think it's fair to say we had some folks who went out there this Saturday and it was closed, and that was super unfortunate. They had a staffing issue apparently that came up. So, I mean, kind of that happened, but it wasn't planned. But we do have some real challenges out there, and we're having discussion with Sylvester, who's currently leasing the property, and Public Works is going to be working on this, I think, on Wednesday.
Yep,
6 o'clock.
pretty optimistic that we can make that work.
Good, so just everybody's aware of that.
And one other item I was going to mention, we had a plan commission meeting last week. We discussed about potentially having a special plan commission meeting, looking at possibly on July 20th, which would be next week, Wednesday. We would potentially look to have a special city council meeting, actually that same evening, related to that development. So nothing we're setting in stone yet at this place, so having communications with the developer and their representatives, but just wanted to make the council aware of that. So if we do have a meeting date confirmed, we'll confirm your availability for that evening to make sure we'd have a quorum.
Is that not confirmed yet, the 5 o'clock? on the
The
20th?
Plan Commission is.
Yeah,
We haven't
okay.
done anything yet with the council.
Okay.
So,
Is it fair to say that folks could use that as a placeholder right now? For
Yes.
Wednesday, July 20th, council meeting, probably at what time?
Plan Commission had said
It's 5 to 6.
five,
Well,
yeah,
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Shouldn't take that long.
Council meeting would be at 5:30 or
We do that.
6.
You could have the,
July 20th.
Go ahead, Jim.
you could have the council meeting at 5:30 because the plan
CSI.
commission is going to take about 10 minutes probably.
It shouldn't take that long.
Yeah, so I guess, do you want to plug in right now, 5:30? We may have to be a little bit late if the council meeting, or if the plan commission went long, but I guess to that point, the placeholder is 5:30, Wednesday night, the 20th of July for a council meeting.
Yeah, and we'll confirm here in the next day or two, both with the Plan Commission and the council on times. For the council, it would just be a CSM, so it'd be very quickly. And then the Plan Commission would actually be looking at the actual site plan and stormwater application, so.
All right, anybody got anything else?
Yes. Early voting, July 26th. The countdown's on. Absentee ballots are in the mail.
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
hearing what the state Supreme Court ruled recently, does that have any impact on Richmond? I mean, in terms of the way we've been doing things? Absentee ballot boxes?
Not being able to use the drop boxes is inconvenient, but
Right.
overall, the constant changes back and forth confuse the voter, and so that makes it challenging as a whole, but we're handling it. Clerks will get the ballots. No worries.
Nice. All right, anything else? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned, everybody. Thank you.